Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we are going to be talking with Sam Brinton of the Trevor Project. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you for having me. Quite excited to be here.
So the Trevor Project might not be something that people are familiar with, but it is working a lot in the LGBT community on suicide prevention. Give us a little bit of background about the Trevor Project, how they started, and how long you've been doing this work.
Absolutely. So the Trevor Project is the world's largest LGBTQ suicide prevention and crisis intervention program for LGBTQ young people. So we serve up to age 25 via a lifeline that operates 24/7 and hear the pain in LGBTQ youth voices and try to help prevent future crises from happening. The story of our founding is pretty exciting. So we're having our 20th anniversary. So
wow, 20 years already.
20 years. And with that, we know we have millions of people have been impacted by our work. It's really, really quite exciting. 20 years ago, an HBO special just told the story of about a boy named Trevor. Now, Trevor loved Diana Ross, and I'll let you watch the full film, but realizes he's a little bit different from the other boys. And through a variety of crises and other experiences, recognizes that he needs to have a supportive community around him. Well, when that show was being shown, the producers and directors recognized, wait, there's no service. If Trevor needed to call somebody, who would he call? And so they used the profits of that film to found the Trevor Project. And 20 years later, we are proudly serving tens of thousands of youth on our lifeline. We also have, because as a millennial, I can't stand to talk on the phone.
Me either.
Right, exactly.
I can't either.
And so we have chat and text. You never have to actually talk to a human being. You can text us and we'll be there for you. We also, I'm really proud of this as well, have Trevor Space. It's over 150,000 LGBTQ young people from around the globe have their own social media space. So unlike other social media, there's no general selling of data or all that kind of stuff. It's just, let's build a community where you can feel safe to be out in your own way, talk to your own peers, and solve your own problems. It's really quite exciting.
That's fantastic that it's an international community and it's peer-to-peer. So this is not necessarily seeking help from somebody who's going to guide you through a crisis.
Right.
It's a matter of just connecting with other people who are part of your larger community.
Which I think is really important because we always say, you are not alone, right? And that is the first thing I think most people need to recognize is that despite what they're seeing on television and despite what they may be hearing in the news, a lot of LGBTQ youth feel like they're alone. They're the only one in their school, they're the only one in their family, they're the only one in their church, and that can be debilitating when you think you're the only one. So giving them an online space where they can recognize that they're not alone, that there's hundreds of thousands of people just like them, and saying that if it ever gets so bad that you feel like you're in crisis or that you might be considering suicide, there's also a place to call. And that's really, really important to us as well.
Because that's also more immediate too. Like in a crisis, I hate the telephone as well, but when you need to talk to somebody and you need to talk to somebody right now. So is this staffed with volunteers, trained volunteers?
It is. So we have roughly 100 staff that operate mostly in Los Angeles and New York City. But then we have hundreds of volunteers who volunteer their evenings to sit with us and, man the lifeline, sit there by their phone ready to text. You can do that type of volunteering all over the country. So we have people in Washington, D.C. that I'll see walking down the street on my way to work who are volunteers who serve LGBTQ youth where they're at. It's really quite exciting. And we are, we're a small nonprofit. There's no way we could do these services otherwise. Right. And I have said over and over again, I wish I would have known about Trevor Project even earlier. Now, I called Trevor Project as a young person, but I wish I would have known about it even earlier because the ability to know that someone on the other end of the phone call is going to know about your experiences. Now, there are amazing other resources like the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and others, but the Trevor Project serves the LGBT community because we understand the LGBT community has a different situation. Right. I'm sure you know the statistics, right? Like LGBTQ youth are 4 to 5 times as likely as their heterosexual peers to attempt suicide. That's horrific if you think about it in terms of when you're calling and in crisis, you want to know that the person who picks up the phone understands the troubles that you're going through, and that they'll use language that's affirming and supportive.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of times when young people are in rural areas, and I will just say in Virginia, we have urban areas and we have very rural areas. And interestingly enough, the legislators who keep killing LGBT legislation tend to be from the rural areas, as if there are no people living there who need protection or support, which, okay, that's kind of ironic, I guess. But when you're in a small town, and I grew up in a small town in Southwest Virginia, you really probably literally feel like there is no one.
Yeah.
The other thing is that in high school, you have problems with shunning, shaming to begin with, but you add stigma to shunning and shaming, and you can understand why people think seriously about it's not worth going on.
Of course, and I think the really important thing to remember is that to any youth who are listening to this, or to any parent who is worried that their child might be thinking these things, being affirmative that they're not alone, even if they don't know somebody else. That's the other hard part. I grew up, I'm a kid from Kansas, is what I say, right? Grew up in the wheat fields of Kansas, and let's be clear, there were probably not that many other LGBTQ people, but there were. Once I came out, the amount of my friends who would later come out and tell me like, oh yeah, I just couldn't be out then. So you're not alone. Even if we may think it, recognizing that that not only are you not alone, but that other people are having the same types of crises. I think there's something in shared pain. We recognize that we are triumphant. The LGBT community is resilient. I am so proud to work for an organization that saves tens of thousands of lives because nothing that we necessarily do or say, but because LGBTQ youth are resilient, because they are able to, once they are given the resources, say, you're right. I'm going to see what tomorrow's like. And that's all we're asking, right? Like, give me until tomorrow. Let me make sure that you don't make a decision today that could end it all, right? Let's give you the resources and the power to know that it's in your hands. That's a really, really important moment.
I think it is. And so you talk about the Trevor Project's 20 years old. So you must have been very young when they were founded.
Yes.
And you have had an interesting life. So you're here in your role as head of advocacy for the Trevor Project, but there's so much more to Sam than just that. You have a master's degree in nuclear engineering.
That is correct.
And an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and an undergraduate degree in vocal performance with a minor in Chinese.
Like Pokemon, gotta catch them all.
I know, and so it's interesting that that in addition to helping people manage nuclear waste and innovating nuclear reactors and very, very important stuff.
Right.
Nevertheless, you're giving a lot of your daytime hours to this kind of work and this kind of advocacy.
Yeah, I always say that it's fascinating to me that people actually don't see the connection between nuclear engineering and LGBT politics, because if you think about it, the first thing that most people hear when they hear like the word nuclear is like a nuclear bomb or Homer Simpson, right? These misperceptions that clearly derail my entire conversation on my industry. Well, if you think about it, the same thing happens in the LGBT community. We are constantly defending a misperception that we're all hairdressers. Now, I love a good, well, I don't love a good hairdresser.
Not anymore.
Right.
Not anymore.
But my idea is that, like, we're constantly walking into a room, correcting a misperception, but doing it with grace. Like, we recognize, oh, the only person you've probably seen might have been, Kurt Hummel on Glee. Okay, so we don't come at it from rolling our eyes. Here we go again. I understand that may be what you think about my community. Let me figure out a way to do it. And that's what advocacy is. Advocacy is conversations. Advocacy is me sharing my passions with the world. And what kind of a dream, right? I get to, our modern American family is that my fiance just got engaged a few months ago.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Is a painter. So every once in a while, he'll be painting, we'll be watching Star Trek, and I'll be reading nuclear waste articles, because that's a journal article on nuclear waste is like my light reading. And I was like, this is modern Rockwell, that we're doing things that we're passionate about. And during the day, what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about saving LGBTQ young lives. And by night, I'm passionate about learning more and having the tough conversations on technical topics. I always like to say when I walk into the room that don't discount me for being near politics. Thinking that that's not an academic field. Like not only do I hold this, I mean it's MIT, a pretty good school I would call it, right in nuclear engineering, but also many of those of us who work in advocacy are well positioned and well trained to do the things that need to be done. Let's not think that it's just a fluff job. Like this is hard. I've also said LGBT politics is way more complex than nuclear physics. Way more complex.
Because there's so much more that is unpredictable
Exactly.
about politics, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
But there's an interesting story about when you were at MIT, and I believe you were doing mentoring. Fifth anyway, I remember
East, yep.
Fifth East, and that was the genesis of your trademark Mohawk, which you've now decided in the evolution of your life you don't need anymore.
It's true. My advisor at MIT dared me to have a Mohawk because he saw all of my students that I was mentoring having these wild haircuts and was honestly tired of me going to Washington, D.C. While I was a student and was like, oh, I've got to keep him here. And so told me, like, I bet you would never have a Mohawk like your students. I said, I absolutely would. Like, why wouldn't I? And he thought that it would stop me from going down and working in politics. The next day, I came back, bright Mohawk, bright colored Mohawk. I won $100 from my advisor, and I had it ever since until recently. I just recently got rid of it, in part because, interestingly enough, everyone was knowing me for that. A lot of politicians all over the Capitol know me for the Mohawk, and my whole point was, great, now know me for something different now. I'm moving, you asked how long I've been at Trevor Project. I've only been there about 8-9 months, right? I'm moving into this field, and I wanted people to know that the new Sam is just as trustworthy as the nuclear physicist Sam, but has a new passion that they're bringing to Congress.
I think that's great too, that you refuse to be pigeonholed,
Amen.
right? Like you knew me for that, but you don't know me for that anymore. And I think that's important because I think as young people feel more comfortable, and Gen Z, I guess that's the next one,
sure.
are coming out in different ways.
Yeah.
And to your point, you never really stop coming out because every time you're in a new situation or you meet new people, you come out all over again. Like you have to explain all over again.
So well said. And I told everyone all the time, I come out as a nuclear engineer all the time, right? Like, so I recognize that we all come out in our own special ways, and how you're prepared to have that conversation is how that conversation might go in the future. That's what matters. Can I do it with grace and recognition?
Well, I think you're doing a great job so far. You're fascinating me. When we come back from this break, we are going to be talking with Sam Brinton. You have no idea just how fascinating Sam is, not just in his advocacy for the Trevor Project, but he's one of the few people I know who's actually been to the Academy Awards, the most fabulous outfit I've ever seen. Join us after the break.
Oh, I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that! That's disgusting! Oh, poop already! You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things. 2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks. Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school. Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight I'm talking with Sam Brinton, who is from the Trevor Project. He is the head of Advocacy. And we are going to turn our subject to something very serious, Sam, that Virginia voters have heard about every legislative session. It's conversion therapy and trying to ban conversion therapy in Virginia, and in fact in all 50 states.
Yep.
But you are a conversion therapy survivor. Probably, you are the only conversion therapy survivor I believe that I have ever met. And so when people see that term, I don't think people quite understand what it is and why it should be banned.
Yeah, I think that's very true. We estimate that there are you've probably met a lot of conversion therapy survivors that you just didn't necessarily know about it. But I tend to be a little bit more vocal about it because I've got an amazing support system who can help me manage talking about this. And you're right, it's a very serious topic. So conversion therapy is this dangerous, discredited idea that you can change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. Now, it takes a variety of different forms. Sometimes it's in a therapist's office, sometimes it's sending a kid to a camp, sometimes it's aversive physical therapy techniques. Mine kind of hit the gamut of all of those in a way. So I am the son of Southern Baptist missionaries, and there's nothing wrong with being Southern Baptist. I still go to a Baptist church. I just use that as a way of describing that many of these programs are faith-based. So as the son of Southern Baptist missionaries, when I came out to my father, he didn't take it well. I didn't recognize it was coming out. I was young, I was open about everything in my life, and when my friends got really excited by a dirty magazine, I thought I was so holy and righteous that it didn't affect me. So I told my dad that didn't affect me, but that sometimes, the cute boy who walked down the street, that was the interest. My father didn't take it well and became physically abusive. I would wake up in the emergency room. It was not good. My mother would step in and say, let's try this thing called conversion therapy. Now, I don't know how she learned about it, but at that time, you could find it just by Googling, right? Like change your kid. And it started off nice and simple. Walked into a therapist's office, just like every therapist that everyone should be going to. I think mental health is really important.
I think it's important.
And so this person looked like they were the real deal. I walked in, and sadly, it started a series of just horrific lies. First, I was told I was the only LGBTQ person left alive, that the government had come through and killed off every LGBT person when they were born.
How old were you?
I was 10.
You were 10?
I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, it kind of becomes this moment of, I didn't have another system, right? This would happen for a couple of years. I always say that it happens between the ages of 10 and 13, right? Like, most of this time is very clearly blocked, right? And I was in shock, of course, but I believed it because I'd never met it, just like you said, like I'd never met another LGBTQ person in this kind of way. And so I believed them that I had also been raised in all over the world. I believe, that, like,
missionaries.
Right. And so in Bolivia, South America, for example, I had seen taxi drivers, when they rebelled against the government, just be shot. So the idea of the government coming through and killing a group of people,
plausible.
They were using my own history against me. Then I would be told that the reason that gay children were killed is that because gays had brought AIDS into America. A horrible trope. I would later, ironically, find out that I'm actually immune to HIV. So the irony that God actually had blessed me with this beautiful immunity for a disease that's caused a lot of troubles in my community, but was not caused by my community. Then meant that but as a child I didn't know this, and I'm thinking I have a horrible disease raging through me, the government's trying to kill me, and then they got even worse, and they said that the reason that gays had brought AIDS into America was because they were abominations. And that was a word that clicked. I knew exactly what abominations were, and I just never realized that I was one of them, and it was excruciatingly painful to think that my God didn't love me as I was. When that didn't work, now I prayed, right? I tried, I did everything I could. There are journals full of me thinking, like, listening to Christian music and praying every morning and wondering why God did this to me. And then we would move into physical aversion. Now, this would happen because my mom had found me in a suicide attempt, and thought, we've got to try harder. This is getting scary. It got much worse. Now, this is not the same for everyone, but for my situation, it started with my hands being placed in ice while pictures of men holding hands with other men were shown. So I would associate the cold I was feeling with the image I was seeing. When that was done, they wrapped wires around my hands and heat was applied to my hands while pictures of men touching men were shown again. So that I would associate that pain with what I was seeing, but then the heat would turn off when a picture of a man touching a woman would be shown. So it would help my brain rewire. And again, I'm 11, 12 years old right now. Like this is a moment where my brain is literally being rewired. Many of you, I'm sure, have taken a psychology class. This is Pavlov's dogs.
Pavlovian response.
Exactly.
They're trying to create a Pavlovian response.
Exactly. On a child, on their sexuality. I had no idea what let's be very clear. I had no idea what sexuality was. I knew I had a attraction to a boy. That is what started this entire process. And I don't understand why my parents didn't just try to explain that attractions are normal, that is a normal and healthy response. They may disagree with who I was attracted to, but the idea was they were rewiring the entire system. And it would end with electroshock, needles, electricity, and pornographic images of men having sex with men. My mother heard me screaming, make it stop, but didn't run into the room for a very clear reason that I want to make very clear to those who are listening to the conversation. Because she loved me. It is very important to recognize that I am not saying this to hurt my family, but my family was lied to. A person lied to my family and told them that they could change their child, and we have statistics on just how prevalent that is. 700,000 LGBTQ people, that's the minimum. 700,000 LGBTQ people have gone through conversion therapy, and 350,000 of them were kids just like me when it happened. This is because therapists across the country think that this is okay to offer. Now, we've been doing a lot of work, and we're going to get there, at some point on ways to stop it. But let's be clear, in Virginia, there are therapists who offer this around every corner. And that's terrifying to me, that I live in a neighborhood with people who think that forcibly changing a person's sexual orientation or gender identity is appropriate.
It is unbelievable. And I appreciate your empathy for your parents' point of view, because we have a tendency to judge. And in parenting, there's all kinds of judging going on in parenting where it's like, but it's child abuse.
Right.
That would be my response, but that's child abuse. But you very rightly understood where they were coming from, misguided as it was.
Yeah. Yes. It was wrong. To be clear, I'm right with you. Right?
It was. But there should be laws that protect people from being misguided.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And that's the whole point, is that right now, all of my life work, so much of my life work, is making it so a mother has to recognize that what she's about to do is being debated by a state as even being legal, right? Like, that's the win for me, right? Like, make it so that a parent has to recognize that no scientific organization thinks that this is appropriate or effective, and that it not only isn't not effective, but it's harmful. You love your child. Don't harm your child. We know that LGBTQ youth that come from rejecting families like those who offer conversion therapy are 8.4 times as likely to attempt suicide than those who come from accepting parents. And that's still 4 times as likely as heterosexual parents. So that could be 32 times as likely to attempt suicide. That's nothing. No mother wants to lose her child that way. No father. I'm not using gendered in a way. I'm just saying, like,
right. Parents do not want to lose their child, and so much of it is really about ignorance.
It is.
And so people don't know what they don't know, and I can, to a certain extent, have sympathy for the fact that they really don't know, and they're asking the wrong people, or they read the wrong things, or they listen to things that confirm a bias they have that is just, it's inappropriate and it's wrong.
It is.
So in 13 states. So this is the connection for the Trevor Project.
Yeah.
This is the connection between trying to manage youth suicide in this community,
yep,
and trying to eliminate conversion therapy and make it illegal in all 50 states.
And it's important that you mentioned all 50. I think many organizations on a variety of issues have concentrated on the states where we can win. And I have argued that as the kid from Kansas, I deserve to be fought for no matter where I live. I deserve to make sure that no matter where I live, I don't have the risk of being erased. That's what I'm fighting for. I'm really proud to say that 13 states, as you mentioned, have limited licensed therapists from practicing conversion therapy on minors. That's huge. And this has happened in basically about 5 to 6 years. In such short order, we are destroying the conversion therapy industry. And I'm really proud of that. Over 35 cities, 13 states. Last year, just before last year, excuse me, we were only working in about 10 to 11 states. This year, along with those 13 states that have passed conversion therapy, 21 other states have submitted legislation. We have submitted legislation and passed legislation in 34 states around the country. We are truly just on this beautiful, beautiful rampage, I would almost call it, of success. And that's great. It's really great. I think it will mean that the pushback will get harder. I'm proud of Virginia. Virginia was one of the very first states this year in 2018 to submit legislation. That's I live in Virginia. I'm a proud Virginian. I'm proud of that moment. It didn't pass, and we're going to talk more about that, but I think it's really important that we tried. That is what matters. We submitted and said to every Virginia youth, you are worth fighting for.
You know, and I'm very proud too, because it was Scott Suravel and it was Delegate Patrick Hope, both of whom have been on this show before. And, you know, the fact that they chose to be the chief patrons of these bills for this community makes me very proud of both of them.
Yes.
But if you look at how it was killed in committee, and, you know, a lot of people, and we talk on the show all the time about, you have to understand how your government works.
Yes.
You know, our House and Senate are controlled by 2 Republican votes, but they make all of the committee assignments.
Yes.
So these things are killed in committee along party line votes.
Yep.
What people aren't necessarily doing, but I do, is I go and look at who those people were.
Yep.
Like, who were the 8 people who voted to lay that bill aside in the Senate? I can tell you who they are, and I can tell you that they came from red rural parts of Virginia, where they're not worried about being voted out of office, and where there are people in their communities who potentially could be harmed by this, but their communities are not bringing this to them saying, you need to be on the side of the young people in your community who need protection.
Right. And it's because, as you mentioned, I think people don't know. This is not, and to me, this is not a partisan issue. We know that we can do this if people just know more about what's actually happening in these conversion therapy centers.
Absolutely. And when we come back from our break, we're going to talk a little bit about what polling numbers show us about how Virginians feel about conversion therapy and about LGBTQ legislation in general. So please join us after the break.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But I don't wanna get on. All that I could do was remember you. You know I usually say no, but if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I
Right?
mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. It is my pleasure to be talking with Sam Brinton tonight of the Trevor Project. When we went on break, Sam, we were talking about polling numbers in Virginia and what they say. Equality Virginia, and full disclosure, I sit on the board of Equality Virginia, did a poll in 2016. Yeah. And the poll said that 56% of Virginians support banning conversion therapy. That's 2 years ago.
Amen.
56%. So the question is, why is a handful of legislators killing these bills in committee instead of allowing them to go to a floor vote where we know that the broader representatives in the Senate and the 100 representatives in the House would likely pass this legislation to convert? I don't think, again, that people necessarily understand how their government works. Yep. And so you've got to look at the people on these committees who killed the bill so it couldn't go to the floor. People around Virginia have got to talk to these people.
Amen. It's true. And they've got to help those legislators understand that they are not representing the views of either party, because no political party has kind of what I would call stuck a flag in this issue. We have had 13 states pass this legislation. 7 of them were signed by Democratic governors, but 6 of them were signed by Republican governors. Some of these bills that I talked about, the 34 states where we've done it, some of these bills have only been submitted by Republicans, and have only been passed via these kinds of work. No party has said that this is what they want to, the hill they want to, climb without any, gear. Just do it. Just do this kind of work. And I don't think they also know what it's going to do. I think many people worry that this is going to limit free speech or this is going to harm communities of faith. I'm a person of faith. I preach in a church. I am not ever going to do something that would harm my faith community. But that's not what this does at all. This says that it is unprofessional conduct to practice conversion therapy on minors by a licensed mental health professional. If you're a licensed mental health professional, you should not be practicing an ineffective and harmful practice on minors. That has nothing to do with the church. I will never tell a pastor that he can't, from the pulpit, say that it is wrong to be LGBTQ. I disagree with them wholeheartedly. My God loves me as I am. But I can't limit that. I can't limit a parent telling their child to, dress a certain way and to have a very specific gender expression. I can't do that. But I can say that they cannot use a blanket of science to shroud what is truly, consumer fraud. That's where I'm trying to get across. This is unprofessional conduct. Without question, your polling numbers say it. Anyone who I talk to literally looks at me like, that still happens? It's not that they want it to be offered. It's actual shock that this is still happening. And let's also be clear to the many conversion therapists in Virginia who might be watching, recognize that if you want to offer this so bad, just don't have a license. Go be unlicensed. And yes, I will do my best to make sure that you are labeled for the fraudulent activity that you're doing. But at the same time, it will help a parent make the best decision. I want a free market where the best decisions can be made based on the best available information. You want people to know who those committee members are. I want them to know that those committee members are not acting in the best manner for those parents in their districts. If you are a parent in those districts, you should know that this not only could hurt your child, but is antithetical to what we in the Commonwealth find appropriate. We stand up for freedom, for the ability to be ourselves. And you may disagree with how I live my life, but you should not be using a license to harm me.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
I agree with you.
Yep.
And so let's talk about one of the Republican governors that signed this conversion therapy ban was Republican Governor Hogan in Maryland.
Amen. I have the pen as he was signing it. I think it's really important to recognize that Governor Hogan, along with these other governors, recognize that the will of the people is clear. We have had the most successful year on ending conversion therapy to date was this year, with 4 bills already passed, with Delaware on the way to being signed, and Massachusetts hopefully in the next week or two about to be signed. These are a smattering of states across the country, and Governor Hogan recognized that he wanted to be on the right side of history. That don't don't think that the erasure of my people is ever going to go down in history as a good idea. Also, don't discount that those who want to practice this will do everything they can to keep practicing this. Why? Because this is an industry.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And a lot of desperate, confused parents would do anything to help their children or to give their children a better, easier life. You know, and I can, you know, there's a lot of parents who have said, it's not that I have a problem with my son or daughter being gay, it's that I just want their life not to be hard.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, I've heard parents say that. I just don't want my child's life to be hard. And I think it's going to be harder. Well, why don't we just change the culture? Why don't we go out and change the world so it's just not hard to be LGBTQ?
That would be pretty great. I would love that.
Can we do that? I think we could do that,
Yes.
and I think it's possible to do that. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak, which is the South.
Yes.
You know, Virginia struggles. I like to call us the Mid-Atlantic. Ooh, we're in the Mid-Atlantic because there is this thing about the South that is like the last frontier for trying to bring sanity to some of these issues around LGBTQ, non-discrimination, public accommodation, employment non-discrimination. We don't have any of that in Virginia.
Correct. I have to start with one of my astounding interns this year. He's one of the first out LGBTQ leaders in Alabama. And Jordan is helping me understand what it's like to be an out LGBTQ young person in Alabama, because Kansas is not Alabama. I know Midwest. I know the West. I don't know the South. I know Florida, which is not the South, and we all know that, right?
It's not the South.
And so I've been asking Jordan like how to kind of go about these conversations. Jordan and I recognize that both of us were put through conversion therapy. Both of us experienced faith-based communities speaking as an authority on these types of issues, but also a recognition that Southerners want freedom. They want the ability to appropriately, you know, defend what they consider God-given rights. Now, that is something that I also believe in. As a proud person who believes that no matter what party I'm from, I want to have the ability to practice what I preach, right? I told you, I'm a person of faith. I want the ability to do that, but it should never come at the harm of another person. And this is the point I've always said, and let's be very clear. I'm really proud to say, and I'll kind of like give a hint to your spaces. We have 3 of those southern states who are going to submit for the very first time this next year. We've already have the legislators who are going to submit them. They won't pass right away.
No, they won't, because we can't even get it done here. We're
right. But it doesn't matter that it won't pass as much as that we're starting the conversation. So just like many have said, and just like I am working with Jordan, let's start the conversation in the South. Let's recognize that this is a absolute, fraudulent activity that is preying on faith communities. There's no other way to say it. You are preying on the hopes and prayers of my family, of my fellow people of faith. That has to stop. And I think if we can do our best to recognize that no matter where you live, no matter what state you're in, we're fighting for you, then I think we're gonna have a win. And it will take time. I am not of the opinion that this is going to happen instantaneously, but I'll be honest, I never expected us to move as quickly as we have. We have passed 13 states in roughly 5 years. Marriage equality took.
You were going to bring that up because I was going to bring up marriage equality. It's kind of like we worked on it. It seemed like we weren't going to get it, and then all of a sudden the courts, and we were not even looking at the path through the courts, and then suddenly there was this incredible momentum, and we had it, and it was like. People had worked for decades to get it, but it's just what I think, like I said, being with Equality Virginia, we kept looking at legislative by state.
Exactly.
And it didn't come that way.
Right.
And so with conversion therapy, is there a tipping point? Is there a momentum at which if you end up with 25 or 30 states, you'll get the rest of them?
I sure hope so. The Trevor Project is leading the world's largest campaign to work to end conversion therapy. 50 bills, 50 states. So any of your people can go to thetrevorproject.org and learn more about that campaign. I think it's astounding. I'm really, really proud of it. But we're doing it through 3 different manners. Legislation, yes, really, really important. Litigation. We have won in the courtrooms from both coasts. So it doesn't matter which coast you're on, we keep winning in the courts because courts recognize that this is inappropriate behavior. This is unprofessional conduct. So we've been winning in the courts, and we do it through public education. At some point, it won't matter what the courts say because we will have basically rode them out of town, right? We will basically have shown that no parent wants this for their child because they recognize it as harmful and ineffective. So no, the 50 Bills, 50 States campaign that we're doing, I'm blown away by its success, but it's also, yes, it's going to take a tipping point. I think we're getting closer to that tipping point each and every year. We didn't even, in some of these states, we didn't work on marriage equality in some states, and it showed. We still have states that are trying via the courts to not appropriately apply it. I will not let that happen with conversion therapy. If you are, in parts of Virginia that don't feel like you're being protected, I want you to know we're fighting for you. And I think that's going to take some time. It also happens, you mentioned the Academy Awards, it happens through a variety of means, right?
Cultural things, right? Because the culture changes.
Exactly. It matters who your messengers are. And people across the spectrum, people of faith, politicians, celebrities, no matter who you are, you recognize that children should be able to grow up as they are. And we want to give them the ability to make their own decisions. Let them make their own decisions which is why we say this is for practice on minors. Once you're an adult, I can't stop you from making bad decisions. I wish I could. You shouldn't eat 100 Big Macs in a row, but I'm not going to outlaw that, right? But you should never force feed a child 100 Big Macs. That's my easy analogy here. It's not quite appropriate, but all the time. But don't stop thinking that children should be forced to do these kinds of things. So yeah, I'm proud to say that the culture shift, is definitely happening. I think it could be a little bit faster, personally, but I'm a survivor, and so I want there to be less. We get calls at the Trevor Project every week of a person who is going into conversion therapy. Their parents are threatening conversion therapy. They're coming out of conversion therapy, and I mentioned it's horrific. I can't go to a lot of mental health professionals because I'm triggered because they basically represent what hurt me in the first place. And I can't try to get across to people that, imagine going to a hospital with a cold, they chop off your leg because they think that's what's going to solve you, and then they say, oh, and we'll see you next week to, solve the next problem. And you're like, I'm not going to trust you.
Right.
You just chopped off my leg.
Right, and that is the erosion of trust, which mental health professionals should really care about.
Amen.
Like when you're trying to help people and you have broken trust with them by, I think it's abuse. That's just me, I'm being judgy, but I think it's child abuse. Anyway, when we come back from our break, we are going to be talking in our last segment a little bit more about our schools. So please join us after the break.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Love is kind. Love is patient.
Open road, here comes the Heffley family.
Whether it's a short trip or a long haul.
Estimated time, 47 hours.
They will beg.
You're hungry? I'm happy to provide.
They will plead.
Deep fried butter on a stick.
But whatever you do, don't wimp out.
Now you're talking.
Make them buckle up.
He can't hurt.
Remember, safety first. Cheese curls second.
Are you orange?
Eva Marie smoked 12,000 packs of cigarettes over 15 years. She quit, and now there's a new lung cancer screening that could save her life. You stopped smoking, now start screening. No matter how much you smoked, early detection could save you. Talk to your doctor or learn more at savedbythescan.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight I am talking with Sam Brinton from the Trevor Project. Thank you so much for being here, Sam.
It was so awesome. What a great conversation so far.
So we had a question come in from Alex in Leesburg about where the school systems fit into all of this. You know, the Trevor Project is focused on LGBTQ youth.
Yes.
So it's suicide prevention. We're talking about banning conversion therapy that affects minors.
Yep.
But what are we doing, or what can we do in coordination, collaboration with school boards, with curriculum? I mean,
it's a really important issue, and we talked about a clear segment that we work on. We work on ending conversion therapy, but we also we have one of the world's largest programs on suicide prevention in schools. We have what's called the model school policy. So we go around to different school districts across the country and say, it's really important that students, when they start the school year or when they're going through a hard time, know that there's a resource at their school where they can go to talk about these really, really tough issues. We're there 24/7. We're there to listen, but a teacher sees you way more often than we ever will. And so we have the model school policy. I'm really proud to say that in some, I think it's like 16, 17 states across the country, they require the school districts to have some type of suicide prevention policy. That's really, really important. We're also calling up school districts and saying, do you have a suicide prevention policy? And if you don't, do you want one? We're happy to work with you on that. Those suicide prevention policies have to be comprehensive.
Right.
Paper is great, but what are you doing about it? Do you have training? I would ask, and tell Alex, the most important thing you could say to a school district is, how are you training all your staff, not just your teachers? Because let's be clear, sometimes the custodian is going to see someone who might be in crisis, right? So how are all of your staff being trained to see the warning signs of suicide? What is the suicide prevention policy for how we report or talk about suicide? It is critically important that when a young person may die by suicide, that one, they're not erased, but they're also not celebrated. We don't name pieces of legislation after those who die by suicide for this very reason, that we want to be careful about how we talk about it. When the news and yourself have to talk about really, really painful issues like suicide, we have standards for how to report on these issues, and a school district should be held to those same standards. They should not be sending out an email that uses language that might lead to further contagion. That's really, really important.
Contagion, and I'm glad you used the word contagion, because behavioral contagion, they actually are using with school shootings as well.
Yes.
Like, you have one and then you're going to have another one, because it's almost as if the behavior is a contagion. And depending on how you handle it, communicate it, or how it's perceived by other students,
right,
it just perpetuates itself, which is a very hard thing to stop.
It is, and I want to be very clear. I'm not stigmatizing suicide, because I recognize that it is a very painful part in someone's life. And again, as a person who's gone through multiple suicide attempts, it's never appropriate to say that a person is lesser because of their
I agree.
space, right? But how we talk about it matters. I am very, very clear with LGBTQ youth that I understand that pain, but that doesn't mean I understand their pain specifically. That each person is very, very specific in that. And so a school needs to be ready for how to talk about that. They also, and I think it's really, really important, school boards could provide funding for these types of things. Let's be very clear. No parent doesn't want there to be training that could save their child's life.
I would agree.
Right? That seems so clear to me. So that's what I say, that's a great, action item, right? That's something that we can all do, is say, is there funding for suicide prevention at my school? If not, let's figure out ways that we can do that. I know that there's been legislation that you probably might want to talk about.
So let's talk about HJ 73, which was a study that Delegate Betsy Carr down in Richmond put forward, which was also killed in committee.
Yep.
Now, that was co-patroned by Danica Rome, who we are very proud in Virginia to have elected the first transgender representative in any state legislature.
So proud of Danica.
I'm so proud of her. I'm so proud of her too, and she's done so much to help people understand that she's a legislator first.
Amen.
First, and she's a good one. But the fact of the matter is, again, why would you even kill this study? I don't understand why, and I think there's so many bills. Our legislative session is so short. It's 45 days or it's 60 days.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's crammed in. It's information overload. The session ends, And then people just kind of forget that these things happen or who did it.
Right. And it's really important to hold our legislators accountable. As an advocate, I'm there all the time, right? Like in Richmond, trying to do everything I can to bring these issues forward. But we're lucky to have legislators like Betsy and Danica who recognize that let's talk about this. Let's bring this forward. Let's have a hearing.
Fun to study.
Just
on suicide and bullying prevention.
Right.
Why would you kill that?
Because the idea is that these are niche issues. Let's be clear. Just because LGBTQ youth are more likely than their heterosexual peers to attempt or consider suicide does not mean that their peers aren't also attempting and considering suicide. It's the second leading cause of death for that age group. We are in a crisis as a nation. We were talking about this before we started, that suicide rates are going up. And I want you to know that like that terrifies me, that no matter how many hours of work I put in each day at the Trevor Project, there's always going to be more needed. And studies like those, that resolution, would have simply said, let's find the best practices. And let's be clear, as a person who studies these best practices, there's a lot of them. You need a study. You need to review holistically what all the best resources are out there. And let's find a way to make sure that those resources get to the people in need. Again, LGBTQ youth are at high risk, but every youth deserves to be protected. And when we don't fund suicide prevention, we are putting our children at risk.
Now, I agree with that. Before the show tonight, I got an email from the Commonwealth Institute down in Richmond talking about that suicide rates among women in Virginia have increased by like 50% since the year 2000. And they were going over the possible reasons for this, you know, that women attempt suicide more often than men. Men tend to be more effective at committing suicide, but now all of a sudden women are catching up, and, you know, we need to look at the data, we need to look at and we need to address it. And I don't understand why they are stonewalling this in the legislature.
I think as we're going to look at, let's be clear, 2019 is coming up, right?
Yes, it
2019 is coming up, and I think what will be critically important as we enter those 45 days, which are just
crazy,
so busy, is we're going to have to bring, and every single viewer needs to do this, bring the issue forward and say that this matters to me. No matter what district you live in, no matter who your state senator is, bring up the issue that this matters to me. And I hope that conversion therapy matters as well, but suicide prevention can be a really great issue that we can all get behind. If you are a school board, write a resolution saying that you need these resources. If you are a teacher, talk in your classroom and provide as many resources as you can. Recognize that there are lifelines that do this. You don't have to be the expert. Let's talk about that for a really quick second, which is, let's be clear, you and I are not necessarily actually the world's experts on helping a person who may be suicidal, address that problem. But we do know how to get them to people who can help. And that's what matters. These studies would have found the best practices so that we could lead people to those best practices. When someone is coming forward to you and saying that they don't know if they can live another day, or that they are really having a moment where they don't know if they want to keep living, it's not your responsibility to solve that problem. It's your responsibility to listen and get them to a resource that could save their lives. The Trevor Project is there 24/7, but it's really important to recognize that if you are not LGBTQ as well, you can always call us too. We don't discriminate. We are happy to help listen to you, and that the resources that are out there are the ones we should be directing people to. These studies and others would direct people to resources. You and I can do the same thing.
The Turning Point program, which is here in Fairfax County, and it's a fairly new program. I've had them on the show before too, talking about mental health first aid.
Yeah.
And so their program particularly meets the needs of those aged 16 to 24, I believe, who are experiencing a first psychotic episode or mental health crisis.
Yes.
But in talking to them, they're like, we would love to do training on first aid, mental health first aid in schools, in scouting groups, in faith communities, and they're really having a tough time figuring out how to get their training and programs in front of people who need them. And quite frankly, the point is, every person on the planet needs mental health first aid training.
It's
all of
true.
us, so that we can recognize, to your point, not that we can solve the problem, but we can recognize that there's a problem and offer some resolution or bring in people who can help.
One, I am loving that you're talking about this, because I would love to work with the Turning Point, right? Like, I would love the Trevor Project and the Turning Point to work together on these types of issues to help people recognize that listening is your first step. right? That's the first step of any mental health first aid is listen. Be willing to listen. And don't be scared that you have to have the answer. I've given you the answer on conversion therapy. Conversion therapy needs to stop. There's no question about it. Like, conversion therapy needs to stop. But when we get to suicide, it's not that you have to be the expert on it. You have to be willing to listen. And I think I've been on the lifeline. I've seen the text coming in from people. That's what they want. They want someone to listen to their challenges and help them understand that they're not alone, that we're listening to them, and that we're doing what we can to advocate to stop the bad things from happening to them. If you're a parent, recognize that it's hard to have conversations with your children about these issues, but that many children are going through these. And so know that having that tough conversation could save their lives. And making it something simple, making it something that my mental health is important. Your mental health is important. My mom was very big about broccoli, right? Like, eat your broccoli. It should be eat your broccoli and know that when you're sad, that's okay. It's okay to be sad. It's how we deal with the sadness that matters.
So let me ask you this.
Sure.
So you've got all these donors who help staff these. So for anybody who's interested in being on the other end of that text or on the other end of that phone call, and you don't have to be from the LGBT community to be a person who wants to listen to somebody who wants to talk.
Exactly. Our volunteer program is nationwide and is an opportunity for people to get involved. So if you go to the trevorproject.org and look for our volunteering opportunities, you'll see there's the Lifeline, there's all the chat and text, which are digital services. There's also advocacy volunteers. We have thousands of people across the country who say, I'm going to advocate for getting a model school policy in my school district. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you do that. If you want to help us pass work to end conversion therapy for youth, we can do that as well. If you want to be trained on how to do this work, we have what's called a lifeguard training, and it's online. You can see this.
I've heard of the lifeguard training.
And so you can get it just online, watching a short video. You can be ready to go to have the tough conversations. Those are different ways that you can be involved. We are so excited to see that people are stepping up to the plate. I'll be super honest. Since November of 2016, we've had some of the highest call rates that we've ever experienced in the 20-year history of the Trevor Project. But people are stepping up to the plate. We are also getting some of the most donations, the most volunteers, and that's exciting. We're living in a really exciting time where people are saying enough is enough. Let's protect our kids.
You know, it's interesting you say that people feel threatened, deeply threatened, and yet there's a bunch of people who've decided to respond to that by stepping up and being the hero in the story. And so thank you, Sam, so much for being here.
My honor.
And I hope that you've gotten a lot out of this program with Sam and about the Trevor Project. And we'll visit the website at thetrevorproject.org.